Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, where you can awaken your mind to clarity and success even in today's life challenges. We're here to provide insights and solutions that will help you live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hi, everybody. This is Joanne Victoria with another amazing episode of the Sanity Project podcast. The Sanity Project podcast has guests who help you, the listener, discover a life of clarity, confidence, and success. And our guest today does just that for her market. Our guest today is Dianne Crampton. Dianne founded Tigers Success Series and developed and validated the Tigers model for group and leadership development. Dianne Crampton certifies project managers and organizational development personnel to use Tiger methods and strategies to build high-performance teams for project execution success. Dianne has a brand new book called BecomingTigers.com, and she's going to talk about that today and how she works with people in online group assessments, staff micro-training, and customized change consulting services for work culture refinement that transforms adequate organizations into exceptional ones in measurable ways. Welcome to the show, Dianne Crampton.
Thank you so much, Victoria. It's nice to be here.
Well, I am certainly glad that you are here because you have a big message to tell our people, especially if they're interested in leadership, which is one of my focuses as well, but in a different perspective. So tell us how you got to the point where is this your first book, number one, Becoming Tigers?
Joanne, my first book, it was one that I published with a group of people called Working Together. This is actually my fourth book, Becoming Tigers, Leading Your Teams to Success. And the one that I published 10 years ago, Tigers Among Us, Winning Business Team Cultures and Why They Thrive. You know, I was looking at what is happening in our economy today, what is happening with leadership today, and decided it's time for a new book. So Becoming Tigers, I started it in August, and we're about ready to go to design now. So I appreciate being able to talk about it today.
Well, I'm glad you're going to give some tips and strategies from your book, especially about leadership and soft skills, as you pointed out here. And as people are listening, it's probably available right now at BecomingTigers.com, so everyone can go there and check out all the little goodies Dianne has in addition to purchasing her book, at least one, if not more, if you have your own team that you're leading to success. So how long have you been a tiger?
I've been a tiger since 1987, Joanne. At that time in my life, I was managing a group of people in the finance industry. And if you remember, way back then, there was a huge recession where home interest rates went to like 18.5% interest. And I came to work this one day, and my staff had been gutted without my information, without my knowledge of this. And then I was brought into a meeting saying that I had to trim another 50%. Well, first of all, I was so upset that my employees were blindsided, had no preparation. We had no conversation about whether anybody wanted to go on half-time or come back as a contractor. They were gone. And I tendered my resignation because I had been wondering what is required to really build a high-performance work team. This is the type of team that is very ethical, quality-focused, productive, successful, but also cooperative in nature. So that question changed my life. I took that question into my advanced degree at Gonzaga University and studied all the group dynamic information I could find in education, psychology, and business. And through this meta-analysis of group dynamic studies, there were 6 principles that emerged. And those principles are trust, interdependence, genuineness, empathy, risk, and success. And they form the acronym TIGERS. So that's how TIGERS came about. But then the question, Joanne, was whether or not you could actually measure these individual 6 principles within group performance and behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And 4 years later, and after 2 independent studies, the results were conclusive. Not only could we measure it on an individual level, which then gave organizations I've served over the years the opportunity to track and measure the effectiveness of soft skill training, but they could also predict with laser focus what type of workforce development, leadership development training or interventions could be used to transform that lower performing principle into something that is much more productive to companies and organizations. And they could actually measure the ROI on that training and development, either as cost savings or productivity improvements or both.
Well, so you see, listeners, that Dianne Crampton didn't just poof out of the sky with a gimmick. This is not a gimmick. To her, this is serious. And to owners of corporations, it is extremely serious. And Dianne has worked with many numbers of them, very big companies whose names would be recognizable, but the list is long, and I'm sure it's on her website somewhere.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, of course. But this is what Dianne is dealing with today is soft skill training. And this is so important because you can graduate from college with your degree and you know how to technically do things, but you haven't yet interfaced with individuals that need this kind of information and they don't have it. Soft skill training is very important, but it doesn't seem to be prevalent in the workforce today, at least in my experience. And I'm grateful that Dianne has written a book that covers that. So talk to us how people are put into leadership roles or advanced management positions and without soft skill training and the ability to communicate effectively, if not at least use some of the 6 principles that TIGERS presents.
Well, and it's really interesting. That is a great question, Joanne, because in the 1970s, Milton Friedman, an economist from the Chicago School of Business, came out with what he viewed as the primary role of a corporation. And that primary role is to make money and to pay stockholders. So what we saw happen from the 1970s to now is that very little management development training took place. All the decision-making process was short-term, not long-term. And it's resulted in all sorts of dysfunction in our society here in the United States and possibly even in Canada, where the top 1%, the money flowed to them, and we saw flatlined management salaries and employee salaries over the years. So what leaders did, CEOs did, is they said, okay, how do we promote people into leadership positions? And it was based on how people got things done with no ability and no forethought on how their performance is in leading people. We see this a lot in project management right today, and maybe your listeners will recognize this too. Many of these corporations are hierarchies. They're top-down organizations, and there are certain rules and procedures that work for the hierarchical organization. So they'll take a manager advance that manager into, or take a person, advance them into management with no demonstration of their ability to lead people, but they have functioned well within that political structure and they could get things done.
Mm-hmm.
So then they need to become a project manager for their department or on a project of some sort. It doesn't work to be a hierarchical leader on a project, which is a short-term ad hoc team, when that project manager has no schooling whatsoever on what is required to develop teams, manage teams, and to get through the hurdles that every new team faces. And they fail horribly. So this whole idea of promoting people who could get things done without any proven ability for them to lead people and what is required to lead people is part of this Milton Friedman failure. And I got a press release in August of this year, or 2019. I got a press release from the Harvard Law School Forum on Corporate Governance. And Harvard pulled together a group of CEOs, we're talking Fortune 100 and 500 CEOs, who took a look at Milton Friedman's theories that the role of a corporation is to pay stockholders. And they came out with a new role, Joanne. And that role is to serve stakeholders, of which stockholders are only one. Other stakeholders are employees. They're the communities that these organizations operate in or have satellite offices in, as well as the home office. It involves customers that this corporation is selling to. So this got me thinking about this dilemma, this leadership gap that we have that's formed over the years by total disregard for workforce and leadership development, and what to do about that. And I write a lot about how managers need to be showing some empathy for employees and coach and mentor them. And I got to thinking about how difficult that is, because if you're familiar with the kick the dog theory, that theory goes like this. You have a bad day at work. You come home, you take it out on the spouse, who takes it out on the kids, who turn around and kick the dog. Well, you can see that whole kick the dog theory operating within your corporate budget. If you've got a manager who does not know how to lead people and defaults to their, I'm going to call it their worst nature when they become defensive, and they kick the employee, who turns around and kicks the customer, who turns around and refuses and kicks the product, you can actually see the financial ramifications of that in corporate P&L.
Well, I think that when you were talking about Milton Friedman in the 1970s, just as a sidebar here, where the company is there to make money and pay stockholders. In essence, that has not changed. And I know you're talking about trying to implement some change or adjustments because, the stock market is based on, it's not, where they say that, the stock market is so high and all of that. It's only high because the corporations are only taking care of the stockholders and the owners of the company. And how is that going to change? Right now we have, they buy back. There's all these buybacks from the CEOs and on up, whoever really owns the company. The owners of the companies buy back their stock. So this is why everything looks good. But the salaries, as you said, there was a stop on salaries. There has been across the board for execs for a long time. And our inflation is about 1% or less. So this is a big job you've taken on to force these people, not force these people, but they have to force themselves, I would say, to change their way of thinking. And if there was this survey that Harvard Law School Forum, whatever, put out, and the CEOs, God knows how many of them, top 100, top 500, Fortune 500 participated, the stakeholders are there at the very beginning of a company, not at the end.
Exactly. Well, and that is another great question, because 181 of these CEOs signed on to a statement regarding this change that they want to see.
I appreciate that. But
and
are these 181 people from the multi-companies?
Yes, multi. We're talking even major stock companies.
All right.
Because the recognition is that the short-term planning does not serve workforce development.
Short-term planning doesn't serve any of us.
No, it does not serve any of us.
It's not that it has to be 10 years or 500 years, as, the Toyota may have done, but, we need a little bit more than a week. I mean, right now, my experience with corporations that are large, maybe not MAGA large, but they are very large, that when they see things not changing, on one hand, when they see things not changing, execs have walked off the job. It's January. You know how December, January, we clean house in a lot of places. Mm-hmm. And these people are upset. And the ones that are remaining walk around with their head down, their tails between their legs, wondering if they're going to have a job, because these are your normal employees. They're not even at the project manager level. They're just employees doing input, output, data in, data out. So they're making whatever they're making in large cities, and, they're frightened. So these project managers and or leaders, because I think a project manager has to be able to be a leader to some degree, maybe not as high as your CEOs, et cetera, but they have to be able to get their people on the same page.
Exactly.
And everybody is so resistant all the time. They don't want to change.
Exactly. And I think that when we look at that dynamic, and we also look at the fact that we have other competing variables happening at this time, there's discussions of minimum wage going to $15 an hour. There's discussions about how at the Senate and congressional level, about how some corporations, for example, in California, in the banking industry, their cashiers have to work 2 or 3 jobs to be able to live in that economy, and a $15 an hour salary would take care of whether or not they can buy medication or
pay their
dinner, pay their rent, buy food.
Nobody can do anything in California. Well,
right.
That's not true, because a lot of people do. But there's certain cultures where they can combine paychecks, and they can combine multiple paychecks and live under multiple people living under one roof with the ability to function successfully like that, and they can live on $15 an hour. But if you want to live in halfway decent housing and not have to go to the food bank to get your food, and not have to rely on Medicare, Medicaid for your medication, and all the demarcation lines in California are very finite. Right. I'm familiar with people who are attempting to do that, and it's like they're getting just thrown away. California's tough.
It is tough, and the case made by this one congresswoman was that, for a single mom with kids, good luck. So I guess so kind of bringing it back to becoming tigers, leading your teams to success. I used an example. This is not your typical business blah 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 book. This book is a story within a parable where I use an example of this manager. His name's Derek Alexander, and Derek has a meeting with his manager on a Friday afternoon, and the manager says, "I'm very concerned, Derek, because You've had high turnover in your department and on your project teams. And I did an exit interview with John, your most recent person who has left the company. And John said he left because of you. You are a lousy manager. And because you've had such high turnover in your department, I'm thinking there's something to it. So here's your written performance review. And I'd like to talk to you Monday afternoon. And this was Friday afternoon, right? So he's got the weekend. I'm going to talk to you on Monday afternoon as to what your ideas are on how you're going to turn yourself around. So Derek is only in his mid-30s. And he goes home and he's just shattered and panicked. And he has to come up with solutions for Monday afternoon. And in the meantime, his third grade daughter has this reading assignment where her teacher wants the family to read this book together. Well, there's your dynamic right there. You know, you have this deep concern that takes most parents away from their families, and then you have a third grade daughter who has to have an assignment where, I suppose if it's a single parent, the mom or the dad is reading this book with the child over the weekend. But in this case, both husband and wife need to read this book with their daughter. And Derek learns a lot. He learns a lot about how to communicate more effectively with his team members and a variety of other things. And how he does that, well, your listeners will have to wait and see. But I took that story because it's so typical of what happens to people today when there's this huge leadership gap between those people who are promoted into leadership positions because they can get the job done with no demonstrated ability to lead before they assume those jobs. And I started thinking about this after this press release I received about the 181 CEOs who all signed on to the fact that it's stakeholders, not stockholders, that are a corporation's responsibility. But also I've been looking at how do we train and develop staff? Because if we go to the old paradigm of sending people off for 4 days of training, that's very difficult to do except for your very high potential employees. But we have implied biases in our society. And there are people who might be more introverted, yet have a calling toward teaching and mentoring and coaching others, who are overlooked because they don't maybe look like or sound like what high potentials have sounded like since 1970, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so, exactly. So I started looking at, when I was building the Tiger system, which is not just a training or just not an assessment of group behavior. How do you train these people to see who actually steps forward with the demonstrated abilities to lead others?
So where can people find this information, Diane?
Well, they can go to becomingtigers.com. This is where those leaders who want to buy bulk books for employees, either through the learning officers or through managers who have study groups developed, infinity groups developed within the company. They can go to becomingtigers.com. And we're looking forward to releasing this book in June, but before June, we are letting people acquire the book in advance at the group discount rate of 50%. And then, because I know people like to receive something right away, I'm putting in there a studio-produced MP3 CD series that can be downloaded into your iPhone or iPad and used when you're exercising, that explains in further detail some of the Tiger's research and what the different 6 principles are: trust, interdependence, genuineness, empathy, risk, and success from the 30,000-foot level, right? Can't do much in a 3-part series other than give it from the very general applications. But I think it's enough for people to get a clue as to why these 6 principles are important, not only from those folks who must build teams for projects and new innovations, but also how it can impact the corporate culture that, let's say, is more toxic now, and how it can be changed without what I call frame-breaking change, which is very uncomfortable for people to go through. How it can be changed just one behavior at a time.
If you are listening and want to talk to Diane right now and don't want to wait to order the book and get the book, you can reach her at Tigers at bendbroadband.com. That's TIGERS at BENDBROADBAND.com. I want to thank Dianne Crampton for being here today. There's never going to be enough time to listen to all the good things that Diane has to tell you about how she works with people and makes them successful and makes their companies successful. But we have to satisfy ourselves today with the amount of time that we do have. So I want also listeners, please go to my website at askjoannevictoria.com, and you can get a free book called The True Self Handbook, A Guide to Transform Your Life, as well as a report, 5 Steps, another free report, 5 Steps to Life Work Harmony. I hope everybody has a great day, have a great time, and thank you for sharing, everyone. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com to listen to more podcasts. Check out Joanne's coaching programs and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Life Work Harmony. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.